It is time! Alright, we are going to be doing a Mewgenics class tier list. I've been playing this game so much. I've been waiting for this game as well. Not like the 10 years like that people have been waiting. But me and my boy Vince, we started playing Binding of Isaac roughly a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. And he's more of a Binding of Isaac nerd than I am. I fuck with the lore and I get with everything, but in terms of like actually having completion, he's like 95% done the game, I'm like 25% done. But Mewgenics is more of like a turn-based kind of games. It's more my style, right? So we're going to be going over some stuff in Mewgenics. Mainly, we're going to be talking about the class tier list, and we do have a tier list pulled up, which we will be going over. But before any of that, I wanted to just throw, you know, why does it even matter? I'm putting up like I'm going to be showing like my qualifications behind this tier list. Right? So I've got 24% complete, 20 hours played. Here we have my house. Double spoiler alert, I guess. There's some spoilers. I should say. Already got my house upgraded. Got some pretty decent cats. Got some good, you know, got some good stats on these guys. You know, got some decent breeding going on. I just retired most of my really good cats. So I couldn't even show you that. But in terms of completion, we have the secondary part of the house unlocked. We have Frank tier 2, Butch 2, Tracy 5, Baby Jack, Tink 5, and 3. So we got some decent upgrades in general on the in the Boone County. It shows I played a lot, unlocked a lot of Tinks. I've been mainly prioritizing Tink, then Frank, and then Butch upgrade item storage. The only reason I haven't done too much on Butch is because I was getting my shits rocked the past couple days, and I just couldn't progress. But I finally built a team good enough, and I kind of got over that barrier. And I think now I've played enough to where I can kind of give like a feel on the characters. And in terms of completion, we've beaten the 3rd day. That's a bit of a spoiler. I won't explain what this is, but we've beaten the 3rd one. I've completed Alley all the way up to Boneyard and Caves, and Desert I just unlocked Crater and Bunker yesterday, which I was working towards because I was trying to complete this. Now, you kind of seen my, you know, expertise, kind of like the, what can I say, the qualifications, I would say. Now, let's get into the tier list. First things first. I do believe there isn't a single, I should probably remove this. I don't believe there's a single D tier, but I almost don't believe there's a single C tier, but we'll get into that. Okay, so first up, S tier Cleric. There's nothing you can say that doesn't warrant Cleric being S tier. Oh, my dog was coming in my room, whatever. The healing you get is just so broken because once you get to the higher rounds, you tend to have a lot more health, but then units start hitting a lot harder and your damage kind of tends to fall off, especially with someone like a Cleric or with your tanks, which we'll get into later. But I do believe that Cleric is just so solid from early game, especially all the way to late game. I mean, it's like if you go into a run and you don't have a Cleric in your team, you might as well just end the run there, because not having a Cleric, you're just such a disability. There's also like the debuff, you can apply buffs, you can't just heal, you can buff teammates, you can debuff enemies. Like the Cleric is just overall great, and there's actually some interesting synergies with Necromancer, which I'll talk about. Another S tier, definitely Ranger. I mean, I had a run where I had inflicted infested every time I attacked. I had bouncing shot, and then I also had refresh ability, so I could attack twice per round, and it was just broken. I mean, once you get Bramble Shot for that AoE coverage is really good, especially on those games where you go against like a Mama Maggot, for example, and she just starts spamming. Getting that down is really great. And then Bear Traps, if you get like, I had a run with Bear Traps and a perk that increased my trap damage by 5. You can spam Bear Traps and then it immobilizes enemies, both, you know, regular enemies, but also it's really good against bosses, I found. So there's nothing to say that Ranger isn't just S tier. Now, for me, I would put Mage in B tier. Now, this is based on my personal experience. It's not, I would just say Mage is my least used class for sure, but I would argue that the reason is because while there's a lot you can do with it in terms of applying, like, you know, fire acid, there's like fire, you can apply like ice, you can TP around the map. There's one class that does something similar, which I believe is just genuinely better, which I'll get into. I haven't used Mage enough to give it a great, but I know it is good. I've used it a couple times. I've got the teleport ability. You can teleport anywhere on the map, and you know, you can infuse your basic attacks with fire attacks, and it is good. And you can steal mana, you can give mana. it's a good mana battery. I say one thing that I think people underestimate is the fact you can use mage as a battery for other classes, but when you bring a mage, you probably don't think of it. I don't know, mage just isn't something I've really gone into that much. Now, fighter, I want to put into A tier because I think it does great for damage, but since you have limited team slots, I would a lot of the time rather bring a cleric over a fighter, and fighter doesn't have the health that a tank would have, for example, so I'll get into that in a minute. But I think fighters overall, it's a good class. It just lacks some of the utility you get from cleric, and also the utility which we'll get into with tank. I think it's a great damage class, but I think you can't underestimate the range you get from something, say like a ranger in terms of damage, which is where I think it kind of falls off. If you build your fighter around like if you have like a great thorns, if you've got bleed, you know, if you build them around a status effect proc class, I think that's really strong. But that's why I'm putting him in A tier and I'm not putting him in S tier, because I find myself running a tank and a cleric more than a fighter and a cleric or whatnot like that. Now let's get into thief. So this is the one where I'm pretty, I'm a bit, I don't know. Thief it's a great class if you get the right perks. Now, what I mean by that is you really need a good passive for it to work. If you get a bad passive, like the passive where if you move it spawns a shadow, that gets a bit tricky because then you can accidentally hit your teammates, and then, you know, you can do a lot of damage, especially if it's backstab crits. So I'm a bit on the edge about thief. I'd put thief in B tier, but I would put it above mage. I think thief is, if you get the TP ability on thief, and then you also get the thing that marks enemies if you crit, and then you can have something like your basic attack hitting twice for half the damage. And if you also then do have one thing, I will actually let me recap. If you have a thief and you have the ability, I forget the name of it, but there's one specific ability that makes it so you force your enemy to turn away from you. That is the most OP build in the game, I swear to God. If you get a high HP stat with a high speed stat and then a pretty decent attack stat, which you can build up throughout the game, thief I think does actually jump up to a higher tier. I think I'll put it in A tier behind that. Actually no, I want to move back down. I think, yeah, it's just to get a thief going, you have to have a lot of resources ready. You already have to have good items because it's so squishy. And while you can keep your distance, and also you can get I think it's hat item, I forget what it is, but it makes it so the first 2 times you get targeted per round, you have backflip, and backflip means you dodge two forms of damage, which is really good. But I think my problem with thief is you just need so much investment to make it really viable, when you could have another class, like you could have a ranger, even a mage, or even a fighter. But I don't think it's worth putting in C. I think it's B tier. Now I'm gonna get into tank, and this is where I'm gonna put it at the top of A tier. Now I think tank realistically could be S, but the reason I'm putting it down in A tier is because I think tank might be one of the highest skill classes, even higher than something like mage, because I think people assume that when you play tank, it's just, you know, high health, you just face tank everything, take less damage. But if you look at it, tank has almost like a sub play style where you can move enemies, because, you know, you shouldn't look at the damage, because yes, tank doesn't have the best damage, and he's got a 4 stat, you know, 4 damage regular. Normally you get like a 4 attack stat, but the main thing with tanks is it always inflicts knockback, so you're not accounting for the knockback damage that's added onto that, which then also accounts for if you hit it into another enemy, if you hit it into a fire, if you hit it into a creep tile, if you hit it into brambles, if you combo it with a ranger. You know, there's certain things that I think people underestimate with the fighter, like those things, which I think is severely underestimated. And then also the fact you can move teammates, you can throw them around. Like the displacement with tank, I think gives it a super high skill ceiling, which is why I would put it in S. But just because S, I put in like ease of use and value you get. The ease of use and value you get from these two versus tank is way higher. I think once people start to, you know, become better at the game and understand more what the classes do, I think tank will then become one of, if not the best class in the game, maybe behind cleric. I'm not entirely sure, but it's just, if you don't know how to use those mechanics properly, the tank is kind of, it's a lot less viable than, you know, other classes. But I do think a tank is a must-have for the most part in your runs. if you're going deep into the runs, if you're going like sewers, if you do plan to go, you know, Act 2 desert, for example, I think a tank is necessary, and a cleric, for the most part. Now, I might be a little bit biased here. When I first started Necromancer, I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was the best. I thought I would have, when I first started, put it around beta as well. Probably above, no, I put it behind mage. I think I'm actually gonna change these, but I think I put Thief behind mage. I would have put it probably the lowest tier. I would have put it as a good character, but not the best. However, as of yesterday, my opinion on this has completely changed, and I would put it top of A tier, if not bottom S tier. And I think I'm actually gonna put it, but I'll put tank up there, and I'll put Necromancer here. Now I'm gonna explain why. We talked about tank having a lot of, you know, the sub role and it having like a lot of usability in the game, but I'm gonna argue Necromancer has the highest skill ceiling in the entire game, and also the most usage. Like in terms of what it's the most, you know, you can do the most different things with it. I'm explaining now why. So yesterday I found out that Necromancer has a lot of stuff where if you end up downing yourself, or if you end up downed, it provides stat buffs to teammates, it does damage to enemies, you can maneuver it while it's downed, right? And I think that playstyle is super interesting because I got a skill which quite literally, it downs yourself, your character kills himself and you're downed. However, if you have built the Necromancer to where its entire playstyle revolves around it being downed, it's unbelievable. I mean, you literally have a passive that when you're downed, you give plus all stat ups to all your teammates. You do 5 damage per round to enemies. You do 1 damage per turn to enemies. You can move it to jump and do damage. Like, if you can get that on board, and then if you have a cleric that can constantly keep reviving it and it can keep downing itself, I think it's one of the best classes, if not the best class in the entire game, even over cleric and a ranger. Now, the default playstyle of the Necromancer, I would say, is apply leeching, you know, use your basic attack to apply leech to then lifesteal for yourself. So that's the one thing I do like about it, is you don't need you know, with a tank, you kind of want to have a cleric full and close behind it, because tanks can take damage, cleric should heal, and then your ranger, thief, mage sits further back, range damaging, you know, staying out of the way of damage, where you can only need, you know, situational healing. Necromancer, however, I think he can go off on his own, and he can solo, if you're going to split it between one tank and cleric on one side with a ranger supporting. I think your Necromancer can go completely by itself on the other side of the map, because if you build it in the sense that it has its basic attack being leech, if you have the ability that I got yesterday, which lets you teleport to downed bodies anywhere on the map, and you gain +1 health, as in like a permanent stat for that round, and you also heal for 4, if you have the one where after each turn you summon a cat zombie, if you have the ability that lets you resummon dead bodies into, you know, reviving them, turning into your teammates, that's broken. But while the whole revival strategy is great, I truly believe the best strategy for it is a familiar strategy. Now, what I mean by that is there's a perk that you get where you summon 2 big leeches on as familiars once you start the game. And you can also have another ability that surrounds an enemy in leeches, and each of those leeches heal you for 5. Now, the reason I say that's so overpowered is because if you pair that with the summon a dead cat at the end of once per turn, cleric, and I think this is where they become the best duo in the game, quite frankly, even better than tank and cleric, is cleric has an ability that whenever your familiars die, it deals 10 holy damage to the enemy that then killed it. If you can stack familiars with your Necromancer, so that being leeches just perma heal your Necromancer, because you get 4 leeches around one thing, and then you get the 2 you spawn, and then the dead cats that you spawn. If you can build around that, the only reason I beat the 3rd boss yesterday is because cleric Necromancer, I would spam spawn, and then every time they would die from the mama maggot that would run over them, 10 damage, and it would just spam it, and he would never die, and I wouldn't have to heal him. I could focus my healing on a tank or on my thief or on whatever, because he could just live alone off those leeches and off the lifesteal. But I will also point out, in those fights where there's a shit ton, like a fuck ton of enemies, right? And you don't have the AoE necessary to take care of those enemies. I had an ability yesterday, which one of my cats inherited through a trait during the breeding process of me trying to, you know, get his, because his stats were unbelievable. He had 3 pass, like it's hard carried me. I got one thing that inflicts. It's 13 mana cost, and you inflict every single enemy on the map with Madness. In case you don't know what Madness do, Madness makes it so that, and it can be applied to your cats as well, but this skill specifically doesn't apply to your cats. What Madness does is it makes it so that that target afflicted with Madness cannot discern what is an enemy and what is a teammate. If your teammate's applied with it, you can't control that cat anymore, and it attacks whatever, and it moves on its own. At the end of the next turn, once you go to the next battle, it ends. But it is permanently active for that battle unless you have Cleric, which you have a debuff remover, you can remove it. Now, if you apply that to all enemies, enemies won't just attack you, and if there's if the board is crowded with enemies, they just constantly attack each other left and right, and they just keep deleting each other, and then it keeps healing you, and it's ridiculous. Like, it is genuinely ridiculous. So I believe, just because there's 3 different playstyles, and I'm sure there's other playstyles I haven't discovered. I know there's the trap playstyle, and then the straight up damage, extra turns, bouncing, stuff around, and then with, you got the bleed, backstab, build, but then you've also got like super long range, high mobility, multi-turn build, and then with mage you got freeze, you've got fire, all that. But I do genuinely believe that this is the single-handedly the highest skill, and if you learn it, the best class in the game. I'm putting it in A just because I do think that it takes a little bit to get it online. Like, I mean, I had 3 passives, I had 2 passives, I had a mutation, and I had like perfect abilities for it and amazing stats. But I do believe Necromancer is the best in the game, but I can't put it just because the hard cap skill, But no, and as far as I know, these are all the classes in the game. I did see some stuff online when I was looking at some, I was looking around. There might be other classes that maybe I haven't unlocked yet, but I'm not sure if that's true. However, I would say this is pretty solid. I would maybe even switch fighter and mage, but I think for now this is a pretty solid tier list. And I'm putting it like this because if I'm going on a run, what I'm bringing is cleric, ranger, tank, and a necromancer. However, I will admit recently I've been switching out ranger for mage just to test it up and see what I can do. And then sometimes I switch out necromancer for a thief just to see. But I think if you want to progress far in the game, this is the build you go for. Wait, hold on, sorry. This combo is the build you go for, hands down. But yeah, no, this is that's it. Thank you for watching. I'll be putting out more Mewgenics videos soon. I'll be doing some full runs. Comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think about the tier list. If there's any changes you would have made to the tier list, feel free to argue with me in the comments. I don't mind any interactions, good interactions. So I appreciate it. Have a good